The ringing of the phone sliced through the quiet of the sunny Sunday afternoon. I was sitting on my balcony, a warm mug of chamomile honey tea in my hands, lost in the pages of a half-finished book. It was a strange and profound sense of peace, the kind I hadn't dared to dream of for the past 5 years. The screen lit up, displaying an unfamiliar number that nonetheless sent a chillingly familiar dread down my spine. I frowned, hesitating for a moment before swiping to answer. "Hello, this is Vicky." On the other end, a shrill, frantic woman's voice, punctuated by the wail of an ambulance siren and the distant shouts of people, assaulted my ears. "Victoria, is that you? Get to Mount Sinai Hospital right now. It's Henry. He's been in an accident. It's bad, really bad. The doctor says he needs emergency surgery, and they need a $20,000 deposit. Bring the money now, save your husband. Hurry, or it'll be too late." I froze for a second. That voice, that haughty, commanding tone, I'd recognize it even in my nightmares. It was Margaret, my former mother-in-law. But wait a minute, your husband? What was she talking about? I set my teacup down on the table with a soft clink. I took a deep, calming breath, letting the gentle floral scent soothe the sudden erratic beat of my heart. Then, I let out a soft, sharp laugh, a puff of air laced with a universe of contempt. "I'm sorry, you must have the wrong number. Or perhaps your age is finally catching up with you," I replied, my voice as calm as it was cold. The line went silent for a second, then the shouting erupted again, louder this time, threatening to shatter the speaker on my phone. "What are you talking about? This is your mother-in-law." "Henry's mother! Your husband is lying in the emergency room, waiting to die. He's covered in blood. You're his wife. It's your job to get the money and save him. $20,000. The number rolled off her tongue as if it were nothing. Did she think I was a walking ATM? Or did she think I was still the same foolish, submissive Vicky from 3 months ago? I stood up and walked to the edge of the balcony, looking down at the bustling city streets below. The afternoon breeze whipped through my hair, a tangible symbol of the freedom I had fought for with blood and tears. "Margaret," I said, dropping the deferential title I once used, "I think you need to see a doctor about your memory. The court finalized our divorce 3 months ago. Your son, Henry, and I are strangers now. Whether he lives or dies, gets in an accident, or gets sick, what does that have to do with me? On what grounds are you demanding I bring you $20,000? Who do you think you are?" A sharp gasp on the other end. She was probably in shock. Shocked that her former daughter-in-law dared to talk back, shocked by my coldness, or shocked to realize that her imaginary throne of authority had vanished like soap bubbles. You, how dare you speak to me like that?" she sputtered. "After all the years we spent together, sleeping under the same roof, he's the father of your child. How can you just stand by and watch him die? You wicked woman. I'll drag your name through the mud for everyone to see your true colors." She had reverted to her usual playbook of guilt-tripping and threats. I laughed again, this time with a bitter taste of the past. "The years we spent together? Do you really have the nerve to bring that up with me? The night you and your son threw me out of the house in a rainstorm, did you remember those years? The day your son beat me black and blue to defend his little mistress, did you remember those years? When we were in court, you coached him on how to hide all the assets, forcing me to leave with nothing but my daughter. Did you remember those years then?" I paused, swallowing the bitter lump in my throat. The emotional wounds I thought had scarred over were now bleeding again at her touch, but it didn't hurt anymore. It was just absurd. "Margaret, I heard your son is about to marry his new fiancée. The beautiful and brilliant Vivian, right? The one from a good family who's carrying your precious grandson? Why don't you call her? I hear she's quite wealthy. Tell her to bring the money to save her fiancé. Why call the ex-wife and embarrass yourself?" The other end of the line went completely silent, save for her heavy, ragged breathing against the chaotic backdrop of the hospital. I knew I'd hit a nerve. Something must have happened with her golden daughter-in-law for her to swallow her pride and call me, the person she once treated like garbage. Vivian, Margaret's voice suddenly deflated, weak and trembling, all the previous arrogance gone. She took all the money and left. "I'm begging you, please, I'm on my knees, just save Henry this one time. I'm sorry, but I'm not a saint. Nor am I a charity, I said, my voice firm. That $20,000 is for my daughter's future, the granddaughter you once called useless. Goodbye, Margaret. I decisively pressed the end call button. The screen went dark, and the endless dial tone felt like the final severing of ties between me and that hellish family. I sank into my chair, my hands still trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the long-suppressed rage that was finally boiling over. 3 months. It had only been 3 months since I walked out of that gilded cage. They thought I would crumble, that I'd come crawling back, begging for a scrap of their affection. But they never could have predicted this. The Vicky of today was not the Vicky of yesterday. And Henry, the man who had betrayed me for another woman, was now lying on a gurney, knocking on death's door, abandoned by that same mistress, Karma. The word might sound spiritual, but at this moment it felt terrifyingly real and brutally swift. I took a sip of my tea, the sweetness of the honey and the slight bitterness of the chamomile mingling on my tongue. I remembered 5 years ago, the day I first stepped into Margaret's house as her daughter-in-law. Back then, I was naive enough to believe in the word family. I had poured my heart, my money, and my youth into building that home. And what did I get in return? Vile betrayal and a cold, calculating cruelty that chilled me to the bone. Can you believe it? A woman like me, a marketing manager making over $100,000 a year, had her paychecks confiscated by her mother-in-law, who would then dole out $40 each morning for my commute, lunch, and the entire family's dinner groceries. A devoted wife who was cheated on by her husband for 2 years, right under her own roof, without a clue. And the peak of their depravity was when they conspired to sell my personal assets to fund his affair. My life story, my tear-filled marriage, and my spectacular, civilized revenge were only just beginning. What Margaret just told me over the phone was merely the tip of the iceberg. Why did Henry end up like this? Who was the mistress? Vivian, really. And what did I do to make them finally see the light? The tea on the table had long gone cold. But the bitter aftertaste of that phone call still lingered, seeping into every corner of my memory. I closed my eyes, letting the evening breeze carry me back in time. Back 5 years, to the day when I, a vibrant 25-year-old woman full of life and a belief in love, joyfully donned a pristine white wedding dress and walked into Margaret's home. Back then, everyone said I was lucky. Henry, my husband, had a gentle intellectual appearance and was the only son of an established New York family with a beautiful brownstone on the Upper East Side. I, on the other hand, came from a small town upstate. Even with a degree with honors from a top university and a coveted job as a marketing manager, in the eyes of my husband's family, I was still the girl who had married up. But you never know what goes on behind closed doors. That beautiful brownstone was actually a gilded cage, locking away my youth and freedom. On our wedding night, before I even had a chance to take off my jewelry, Margaret summoned me to the living room. She sat on a grand antique armchair, her face a cold mask, and pushed a typed sheet of paper toward me. A long list of family rules. Victoria, marrying into this family is a great blessing. I'm telling you this now so you know how to conduct yourself. It's just the 3 of us here. Henry's father passed away a long time ago, and I raised him on my own, so I don't want my son to be at a disadvantage. Starting this month, I will hold on to both your and Henry's paychecks. I was stunned, stammering, but Margaret, we're adults. I'd like to manage our own finances for expenses and savings. Savings for what? Margaret cut me off, her voice sharp. You're young and inexperienced. If you have money, you'll just spend it frivolously. I'm holding it for you. When there's a major expense, I'll give it back. I'm not going to steal it, so don't worry. Henry has already agreed. As his wife, you follow his lead. I turned to Henry, hoping he would say something, anything, in my defense. But he just kept his head down, meticulously peeling an apple. Just let Mom hold it, Vicky, he mumbled. She's better with money than we are. Don't argue with her. His words were like a bucket of ice water dumped over my head. But as a new bride wanting to keep the peace, I reluctantly handed over my debit card, and that was the beginning of my life as an unpaid, high-end domestic servant. Every morning before work, I had to be up by 5 a.m. to clean the sprawling 4-story house and then go grocery shopping and cook breakfast for everyone. Margaret was meticulous. The Sunday pot roast had to be slow-cooked overnight. The salad greens had to be washed leaf by leaf. After that, I'd rush to my high-pressure job at the office. In the evenings, while my colleagues went to happy hour or the spa, I would race back home to cook dinner. Henry would come home from work, prop his feet up, watch TV, and wait to be served. Margaret would return from her yoga class and inspect the house for dust, criticizing the soup for being too salty or too bland. The most humiliating part was the money. My salary was nearly $10,000 a month, and Henry's was about $5,000. All of it went into Margaret's safe. Every morning, she would hand me exactly $40. "This is for gas, your lunch, and dinner for the 3 of us," she'd instruct, her eyes glued to the bills as if she feared I'd skim $1. "Make it stretch. No frivolous shopping." $40 for a day's worth of food for 3 adults in New York City. I had to rack my brain, shop at discount markets, and haggle over every bunch of carrots. There were days I wanted to buy a nice organic chicken to make a special meal for my husband, so I'd skip lunch, drinking only water to save enough money. Once, my company held its annual black tie gala. I opened my closet to find only worn-out clothes from my college days. I gathered my courage and asked Margaret for $500 to buy a new dress. She looked at me as if I'd just confessed to robbing a bank. "A dress? For what? You're a married woman. Who are you trying to impress? Wear what you have. $500 is what some families live on for a whole month. Stop being so wasteful." Humiliated, I ran to our room in tears and told Henry. He was in the middle of a video game and scowled at my crying. "What's the big deal about a dress? Mom's right. Stop trying to keep up with the Joneses. I think you look fine in your clothes from home." It was then I realized my husband wasn't just weak-willed, he was cruelly indifferent. He was so used to his mother's coddling and my servitude that he took it all for granted. In his eyes, and his mother's, I was just a machine for making money and doing chores, with no needs or feelings of my own. I considered divorce right then and there. But then, a pregnancy test showed 2 pink lines. My child, arriving at my lowest point, became the thread that kept me tied to that personal hell. I told myself to hold on, just a little longer, for my baby's sake. Maybe a grandchild will change Margaret, I thought. Maybe Henry will finally grow up. But I was wrong. My silent sacrifice was not only unappreciated but was about to be trampled into dust by the arrival of a third person, someone who would shatter the fragile facade of our happy family. When my daughter Lily turned 2, Henry's career started to look up. He was promoted to a team lead. His salary didn't increase much, but he began entertaining clients and partners more frequently. I started noticing strange changes in him. He became more meticulous about his appearance, wearing expensive cologne whenever he left the house, and his phone became permanently attached to his hand. He set a new password, always placed his phone face down, and would often step out onto the balcony for hushed, late-night calls. A woman's intuition told me something was wrong, but every time I asked, Henry would brush it off. "Stop being so paranoid, Vicky. Work is stressful enough. I come home wanting peace and quiet, and you interrogate me like I'm a criminal." When Margaret overheard our arguments, she would jump to her son's defense. "He's out there working hard to provide for you and your daughter. You should be more grateful instead of making these jealous accusations." A jealous woman is a foolish woman. Once again, I swallowed my anger and kept quiet, until one day, when he was in the shower, I happened to see a notification light up on his locked screen. "Hey baby, can you come over tonight? I miss you so much." And the baby misses his daddy too. Vivian, assistant. The world spun around me. Baby? What baby? Did Henry have another child? My hands shaking, I picked up his phone. Luckily, I had surreptitiously noted his new password a few days earlier. My eyes were met with a flood of romantic texts and intimate photos of Henry with a young, beautiful, and stunning woman. She was, as the text suggested, a new assistant at a partner firm named Vivian. But what made my blood run cold wasn't the saccharine pet names, but the money transfer receipts. Henry, I sent you $800 for prenatal vitamins. Make sure you take care of yourself and our little prince. Vivian, honey, I love that new Gucci bag. It's only $2,500. Can you buy it for me? Henry, okay, let me get the money from Mom and I'll send it over. My legs gave out from under me. So, the salary I worked my fingers to the bone for, the money I handed over to my mother-in-law, wasn't being saved as she claimed. She was giving it to Henry, and Henry was using it to support his mistress. An even more horrifying truth was revealed as I scrolled further back, finding a text exchange between Henry and his mother. Henry, Mom, Vivian had her ultrasound. The doctor says it's 90% a boy. Your grandson. Margaret, really? Oh, thank God. The ancestors have blessed us. That's wonderful, son. You need to take good care of her. I'm so sick of Vicky and her useless girls. Henry, we'll keep it from Vicky for now. We'll figure it out after Vivian gives birth. Margaret, don't worry about the money. Just tell me if you need more. We'll use Vicky's salary to support my grandson. I dropped the phone on the bed. The soft thud echoed the sound of my heart shattering into a million pieces. This whole family was a team of organized con artists. The mother-in-law I had called Mom, the woman I had served hand and foot for 5 years, was an accomplice in her son's infidelity. She didn't just turn a blind eye, she actively used my hard-earned money to nurture the fetus in her son's mistress's womb, all because of her archaic, cruel preference for boys. My Lily, her own flesh-and-blood granddaughter, had never received so much as a box of crayons from her. She dismissed her as a useless girl. Yet, for this unborn child of a homewrecker, she was willing to bleed her daughter-in-law dry. Hatred, humiliation, pain, a tidal wave of toxic emotions rose in my chest, making it hard to breathe. I wanted to storm into the living room and expose their disgusting hypocrisy right then and there. But the pragmatism of a businesswoman held me back. If I caused a scene now, what would I gain? Henry would deny everything, or worse, openly leave me for his mistress. Margaret would join him in kicking me and my daughter out. All the assets were in her name, or Henry's. I didn't have a penny to my name. I would lose everything, and my daughter would suffer. I had to be calm. I had to make a plan. I had to get back what was rightfully mine before I kicked this rotten family out of my life for good. I wiped my tears, placed the phone back exactly where it was, and forced my breathing to even out. When Henry walked out of the bathroom, whistling a cheerful tune, I was sitting there, calmly folding Lily's clothes, my face as serene as a calm lake before a hurricane. Finished with your shower? Are you eating at home tonight? I asked, my voice as gentle as if I knew nothing. Oh no, honey. I have to entertain a client with my boss tonight. I'll probably be late. You and Mom go ahead and eat without me, Henry said, combing his hair and spraying on the cologne I now knew was for another woman. Okay, drive safe. As the door closed behind him, the placid smile on my face vanished, replaced by a gaze as sharp and cold as ice. Go on. Enjoy your last few days of blissful ignorance. Because now that I know the truth, the price you're about to pay will be far higher than you could ever imagine. In the following days, I began secretly investigating Vivian. Who was she? Why was she targeting Henry, a weak-willed man with a modest salary but a big ego? More importantly, I discovered a terrifying plot they were hatching to seize the only major asset I had, a condo my parents had gifted me when we got married. What did they plan to do with it, and how would I turn the tables on them? And was the truth about the precious grandson and the mistress Vivian as simple as they thought? After that fateful night of discovering the secret on my husband's phone, I moved through that house like a ghost. On the surface, I was still the obedient daughter-in-law, going to work, cooking, and cleaning. But inside, my heart had turned to ice, and my mind was a fortress of vigilance. I knew this false peace was just the calm before the storm. And that storm arrived sooner than I expected. Not from the mistress, but from the bottomless greed of my husband and mother-in-law. One weekend evening, Margaret broke tradition and cooked my favorite dish, a rich beef stew. She fussed over me, piling food onto my plate, the smile on her face so sweet it made my skin crawl. Henry, sitting beside me, was also unusually attentive, asking if my work was stressful. After dinner, Margaret called us into the living room, brewed a pot of tea, and cleared her throat to begin. "Vicky, Henry's career is really taking off. He has a chance to go into business with some influential partners, opening a chain of restaurants. The only problem is, he's a little short on capital. I was thinking, maybe you could help your husband?" I took a sip of tea, trying to hide my smirk. "How can I help, Margaret? You have all my salary. I don't have any money." Margaret hesitated for a moment before getting to the point. "I remember your parents gave you that condo downtown as a wedding gift, right? That property is worth a lot of money now. Why don't you talk to your parents about selling it? You can give the money to Henry as seed capital. It's a joint effort, husband and wife. When his business succeeds, you'll be the one to benefit." Henry, sitting next to her, eagerly jumped in, his eyes gleaming. "She's right, honey. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Just sell it. I promise I'm only borrowing it for 2 years. Once I make a profit, I'll buy you a place twice as big." I looked at the two of them, a wave of profound disgust washing over me. That condo was the nest egg my parents had saved their entire lives to buy for me, a safety net for my future. And they had the audacity to ask me to sell it. In reality, from snooping on Henry's phone and overhearing Margaret's hushed calls, I knew exactly what this business opportunity was. There was no restaurant chain. The truth was, Henry was drowning in debt from gambling and sports betting, owing over $40,000. The loan sharks were threatening to break his legs if he didn't pay up. On top of that, Vivian was demanding he buy her a luxury condo to secure her pregnancy, threatening to have an abortion otherwise. Henry and Margaret were cornered. They couldn't sell the brownstone they lived in. That was Margaret's status symbol in the neighborhood. So, they set their sights on my last remaining asset. They wanted to strip me of everything I had to pay off gambling debts and house his mistress. "The condo is in my parents' name. I can't sell it," I said coolly, placing my teacup down with finality. Margaret's face hardened, her fake smile gone. "Then go talk to them. You're their only daughter. Who else would they give it to? Or are you being stingy with your own husband? His career is on the line. If you don't help him, who will? His career or his debts?" I asked, my voice low, my eyes boring into Henry. Henry flinched, knocking over his glass of water. "What nonsense are you talking about? My business is legitimate. What debts?" "All right," I stood up, feigning a sigh. "I'll think about it. This is a big decision. I can't say yes right away." I went back to my room, leaving the two of them fuming in the living room. Later that night, I heard them arguing from Margaret's room. "See how stubborn your wife is? If she doesn't sell the condo, I'm dead, Mom. The loan sharks gave me until next week, and Vivian is threatening to leave. Calm down. Let me handle that little witch. If the soft approach doesn't work, we'll get tough. She's living in our house, and her daughter is here. She can't go anywhere. We'll keep pressuring her. She'll have to give in eventually." Hearing those venomous words, I knew I couldn't wait any longer. They didn't see me as family. They saw me as prey. I had to act before they did. The next day, I quietly took a day off work. I gathered all my important personal documents in the condo's deed, which I had secretly brought from my parents' home and hidden away, and placed them in a bank's safe deposit box. I also secretly installed a miniature camera in the living room to collect evidence. But I never imagined their cruelty would go beyond just demanding money. Their greed and lust would push the tragedy to its breaking point, leading to that fateful stormy night I will never forget. One Friday evening, I received a text from an unknown number. It was a photo of Henry with his arm around a woman walking into a high-end hotel downtown, accompanied by a taunting message. "Hey wifey, just so you know, your husband is taking very good care of me and our baby. You just stay home and cook dinner, okay?" The sender was, of course, Vivian. She was provoking me. She wanted me to lose my mind, to give up and leave, making way for her to step into Margaret's home. Rage flooded my senses. I couldn't take it anymore. I sent my daughter to my parents' house for a sleepover and hailed a cab straight to the hotel from the photo. I wasn't going there to start a catfight. I was going for a final confrontation, to end this disgusting charade once and for all. Standing in front of room 302, my heart hammered against my ribs. I took a deep breath and knocked. "Who is it? Room service?" Henry's voice, slurred with alcohol, came from inside. The door opened. Henry stood there, wrapped only in a bath towel, his face flushed. Inside, Vivian was lounging on the bed in a flimsy nightgown, rubbing her slightly rounded belly with a triumphant look on her face. Seeing me, Henry froze, the color draining from his face. "Vicky? What? What are you doing here?" I didn't answer, pushing past him into the room and staring directly at Vivian. She wasn't scared at all. Instead, she smirked and slowly sat up. "Well? Hello, Vicky. You have great timing. Henry just promised to buy a new condo for me and the baby." "Henry." I turned to my husband, my voice trembling with suppressed fury. "Where are you getting the money to buy her a condo? From selling my parents' property? Or from the salary you've been stealing from me for years?" Henry stammered, looking from me to Vivian, speechless. Vivian pouted. "Don't be so cheap. This is the heir to your family name. He's worth a little expense. Since you couldn't give him a son, I'm doing it for you. You should be thanking me." "Thank you?" I let out a bitter laugh. "Thank a gold-digging homewrecker like you? You think he loves you? He just needs the baby in your belly to get money from his mother. And you just need his money. You two are a perfect match, both equally disgusting." "Shut your mouth," Henry suddenly screamed, lunging at me. "How dare you insult her? She's carrying my son." "Your son?" I blurted out the suspicion I'd had for weeks. "Are you even sure it's yours?" That was the spark that lit the powder keg. Vivian shrieked, playing the victim. "Honey, did you hear that? She's cursing our baby. She wants to kill our baby. Do something." Henry, drunk and enraged, didn't hesitate. Crack! A stinging slap landed across my face, the force of it sending me stumbling backward. I hit my head on the corner of a table. I felt a trickle of blood. I looked up at the man I once called my husband. He stood there, his eyes bloodshot, fists clenched, without a shred of remorse. "Get out," he snarled. "Get out of my sight, you venomous bitch." I staggered to my feet, wiping the blood from my forehead. I looked at Vivian's victorious smirk and Henry's animalistic rage. I didn't cry. My tears had long run dry. "Fine, I'll go. You can have this piece of trash. I wish you both happiness in the gutter you've made for yourselves." I turned and fled the hotel, hailing a cab straight home. I had to talk to Margaret. I still clung to a sliver of hope that despite her greed, she was still a mother, a grandmother. Surely, she would have a shred of conscience when she learned her son had beaten his wife for his mistress. But I was terribly wrong. By the time I got home, a torrential rain had started to fall. I burst into the living room, disheveled, my forehead still bleeding. Margaret was watching TV and jumped when she saw me. "What happened to you? Are you crazy? Look at you, making a scene and shaming this family." "Margaret," I choked out. "Henry, he's having an affair. He hit me. He's been taking our money to support her." I expected her to be shocked, to ask questions, but she simply took a calm sip of her tea, her eyes never leaving the TV screen. Her voice was ice. "I know." "So what?" I was speechless. "You know? You know and you did nothing? You condone your son's affair?" Margaret finally turned to look at me, her eyes filled with a contempt I will never forget. "He's a man. It's normal for him to have a little fun on the side. The important thing is that Vivian can give him a son. She's capable, and she knows her place. What have you done for this family in 5 years? You only gave me a granddaughter. And you're so stingy with money, refusing to sell the condo to help your husband. You're a useless daughter-in-law. Don't call me Margaret," she snapped. I can't stand the sound of it. She stood up and pointed to the door. "Henry already called me. He told me you were disrespectful, that you insulted his other woman. This family has no place for a daughter-in-law like you. If you know what's good for you, get out of my sight. I need to make room for Vivian and my grandson. My heir can't be living on the streets." "You're kicking me out? In the middle of the night? In this storm?" I asked, trembling. "Get out now, or are you planning to stay and make a scene? This is my house, and I can do what I want." With that, she stormed into my room, grabbed a few of my clothes, stuffed them into an old suitcase, and threw it out onto the porch. "Get out. And don't even think about taking anything that belongs to this house. Lily is already at your parents'. Let her stay there. This family doesn't support freeloaders." I stood on the porch as the cold rain poured down on me, mixing with the blood on my forehead, the salty taste stinging my lips. My suitcase lay open in a puddle. The heavy front door slammed shut in my face, severing all ties, all hope. I looked up at the magnificent 4-story brownstone, a place where I had spent 5 years of my youth polishing every tile, cooking every meal. Now it was a cold fortress that had rejected me. That stormy night, I dragged my heavy suitcase, stumbling out of the familiar street. I didn't look back. I knew I had just escaped from hell. It was painful, it was humiliating, but I was alive. And I swore to myself that the people who threw me and my daughter out into the storm that night would pay. I took a cab to my parents' house, threw myself into my mother's arms with my daughter, and cried until I had no tears left. After that stormy, tumultuous night, I returned to my parents' house, my body exhausted and my soul covered in wounds. My parents were heartbroken to see their daughter so broken and their granddaughter so bewildered. My father, a gentleman his whole life, slammed his fist on the table and declared, "You're divorcing him." Immediately, "We have more than enough to care for you and Lily. Don't waste another thought on those heartless people." With my parents' full support, I filed for divorce the very next morning. I thought it would be a clean break, that we would go our separate ways. But I was naive to underestimate the cruelty of Margaret and Henry. For them, divorce wasn't just the end of a relationship, it was one last chance to squeeze me dry, to take everything I had before kicking me out of their lives for good. The first mediation session was suffocatingly tense. Margaret and Henry arrived with an entire entourage, including their own lawyer, Mr. Davis, and a group of strangers I later learned were paid to be false witnesses. Henry sat across from me, his face no longer aggressive like at the hotel, but cold and calculating. He didn't look at me once. When the mediator brought up asset division and child custody, Henry's lawyer stood up and made a statement that left me stunned. "Your Honor, my client requests full custody of their daughter, Lily. The reason being, Miss Miller is morally unfit to be a mother. She has been engaged in an extramarital affair, neglected her family, and currently has no stable income or residence, relying on her parents for support." I shot up from my chair. "That's a lie. You're the one who had an affair. You have another child." Margaret immediately jumped in, pointing a finger at me. "Don't you dare make false accusations in court. My son is a respectable man. You, on the other hand, who knows who you were with on all those late nights at work? I have proof." She threw a stack of blurry photos onto the table, pictures of me at business dinners and coffee meetings with male colleagues and clients. They were secretly taken, cleverly angled to imply intimacy. They had even hired a man, Gary, to come to court and claim he had been my lover for the past 2 years. My blood boiled. They weren't just trying to take my daughter, they were trying to utterly destroy my reputation. They wanted to paint me as a promiscuous woman to justify their actions and seize my assets. Regarding finances, Henry claimed that all their savings came from his income and that my salary was just pocket money. He demanded half the value of the condo my parents had given me, claiming its value had increased thanks to his contributions as a husband. He shamelessly denied that Margaret had taken my entire salary for 5 years. I looked at Henry, then at Margaret, and felt a profound sense of disgust. How could people be so despicable? But they had forgotten one thing. I was a professional. I could endure for the sake of my family, but when backed into a corner, I knew how to fight back. I took a deep breath and signaled to my lawyer, Mr. Wright. He calmly opened his briefcase and presented the ironclad evidence I had been secretly gathering. First, regarding the adultery accusation, we presented security footage from my office building, proving all those meetings were professional and attended by other colleagues. We also played the audio recording from the night of the hotel incident, in which Henry admitted to having a child with Vivian, and Margaret was heard explicitly kicking me out. Under cross-examination from my lawyer, the fake witness, Gary, quickly fell apart and admitted he had been paid $200 to lie. Second, on the matter of assets, I presented 5 years of bank statements. Although I gave Margaret cash, my salary was direct deposited. The statements showed a large, regular withdrawal each month that perfectly corresponded with the dates Margaret made large deposits into her own savings account, for which I had managed to snap a photo of the passbook. Most importantly, the deed to my condo, notarized before my marriage, clearly stated it was a gift solely to my daughter, Victoria Miller. Under the law, it was my separate property. Henry had no claim to it. After reviewing the evidence, the court dismissed all of Henry's outrageous claims. I was granted sole custody of Lily, with Henry ordered to pay monthly child support. The condo was affirmed as my sole property. As for the 5 years of salary, because I had given it to her in cash without receipts, the court couldn't force Margaret to return it. Though I lost a significant amount of money, I had won my daughter and my dignity. That was the greatest victory of all. Walking out of the courthouse, Margaret's face was purple with rage at having failed to get my condo. "Consider it a donation," she spat. "A divorced woman like you is worthless anyway. Enjoy a miserable life alone with your daughter." Henry glared at me with pure hatred. "You're clever, but don't think you've won. Without me, you're just a single mother. Let's see what man would ever want you." I looked them both straight in the eye and smiled, a proud, defiant smile. "Thanks for your concern. You should worry about holding on to your precious mistress and your golden son. As for me, leaving your family was the best thing that ever happened to me." I buckled my daughter into her car seat and drove away, leaving their twisted faces of greed and hatred behind. The gates of hell had finally closed. A new horizon was opening up before me. I knew the road ahead would be tough, but at least I could finally breathe the air of freedom. 3 months, 90 days. Not a long time, but long enough to completely change a person's destiny if they know how to pull themselves out of the mud. The first few weeks after the divorce were incredibly difficult. I rented a small apartment for my daughter and me, playing the role of both mother and father while scrambling to make ends meet. Every night, holding Lily in my arms, my pillow would be soaked with tears of self-pity, the wounds still too fresh to heal. The images of Henry's betrayal and Margaret's cruelty haunted my dreams. But every morning, seeing Lily's innocent smile, I told myself I could not fall. I would not give my enemies the satisfaction of seeing me broken. The sweetest revenge isn't screaming or fighting, it's living a life 1,000 times happier and more brilliant than the one I had with them. I threw myself into my work like a woman possessed. With my experience and talent, and now free from the burdens of household chores, I quickly regained my professional edge. I closed 3 major deals for my company in quick succession and was promoted to director of marketing, with my salary doubled. With money came self-investment. I chopped off my long, drab hair for a chic, stylish bob, colored a fashionable chestnut brown. I threw out the frumpy, oversized clothes Margaret used to make me wear and replaced them with elegant, professional dresses that accentuated a figure I had long neglected. I started yoga, invested in skincare, and learned the art of subtle makeup. Looking in the mirror, I saw a completely different Victoria, younger, sharper, and radiating vitality. The sadness in my eyes was replaced with a confident, powerful light. Men at the office and among our clients began to notice, sending admiring glances and invitations, but I just smiled politely. My heart needed time to heal. My love was reserved for my daughter and for myself. The more my life blossomed, the more Henry's life began to crumble. I heard through the grapevine that he had fallen on hard times. After the divorce, Henry officially moved Vivian into the brownstone. Margaret was ecstatic, doting on her new daughter-in-law who was carrying the family heir. But the honeymoon phase was short-lived. Henry poured the last of his savings and borrowed heavily from friends to open a lavish restaurant at Vivian's behest. She had painted a picture of herself as a glamorous proprietress, sitting back and counting cash, but Vivian was all style and no substance. She was lazy and had an empty head, splurging on designer decor and personal shopping sprees instead of managing the business. Within 2 months, the restaurant was a ghost town. The food was terrible, the staff was rude, and customers never returned. The initial investment was gone, and the weight of bank loans and high-interest private loans began to crush Henry. His luck at his day job also ran out. Distracted by the failing restaurant and his high-maintenance mistress, he made a critical error on a major contract, causing a huge loss for his company. He was reprimanded and demoted to a junior position, his salary slashed in half. Financial pressure soured the atmosphere in Margaret's 4-story house. Dinners were no longer filled with cheerful chatter about a bright future, but with heavy sighs and bitter arguments. I ran into Henry at the supermarket once. He looked gaunt and exhausted, pushing a cart for Vivian, his face unshaven, his clothes rumpled. Vivian, beside him, was scowling, nagging him because he couldn't afford the expensive imported grapes she wanted. When he saw me, his ex-wife, radiant in a bright red dress and high heels, laughing with our daughter, he was so stunned he dropped a carton of milk. He stared at me, his eyes a mixture of shock, regret, and shame. I swept past him like a breeze, not even bothering to say hello. In that moment, I knew I had won. Not because I was richer, but because I had reclaimed my own worth, something I had lost completely when I was with him. But that was only the beginning of their family's collapse. When the money ran out, so did the love. The mistress Vivian, once coddled like a fragile doll by Margaret, began to show her true colors as a greedy, conniving fox. A new version of the mother-in-law versus daughter-in-law drama was about to unfold, and it would be 100 times more brutal than anything I had ever endured. While I was enjoying the most vibrant days of my life, a tragicomedy was playing out daily in the 4-story house that had once been my prison. This information didn't come from me seeking it out. News, good or bad, travels fast. The neighbors, who had long been annoyed by Margaret's arrogance, eagerly relayed the drama to me over coffee, treating it like a soap opera. They said that ever since Vivian moved in, Margaret had aged 10 years. If she had once seen me as a thorn in her side for being too capable and independent, she was now learning the hard way what it meant to welcome a tiger into her home. Vivian, who had entered the family with a 4-month pregnant belly and been treated like a queen, shed her sweet, innocent facade almost immediately after I was gone. She revealed herself to be lazy, disrespectful, and a professional gold digger. Every morning, she would emerge from her bedroom long after the sun was high, never lifting a finger to do any chores, not sweeping, not cooking, not even washing her own plate. "Margaret, what's for breakfast? Pot roast? Ugh, I can't eat that, it's too heavy. Go buy me an organic acai bowl. Your grandson is craving it," Vivian would command from the sofa while filing her nails. Margaret, the same woman who had forced me to wake at 5 a.m. to prepare elaborate meals, now had to trudge to the store to buy specialty foods for her new daughter-in-law. "You're pregnant, you should get some exercise. Lying around all day will make for a difficult labor," Margaret grumbled. Victoria was scrubbing floors right up until her due date. The moment she heard my name, Vivian shot up, her eyes flashing. "Don't you dare compare me to that pathetic small-town ex-wife of his. I am a different class of woman. I'm carrying the precious bloodline for this family. If you like her so much, go call her back to be your servant. I'm tired, and I'm not doing it." Margaret was speechless. She had never been talked back to like that. But one look at Vivian's belly, and the thought of the grandson she so desperately craved, made her swallow her pride and continue playing the role of a maid. On top of her laziness, Vivian was a money-burning machine. While Henry's career was tanking and the restaurant was bleeding money, she continued to shop extravagantly. Every day, packages of new clothes, cosmetics, and handbags would arrive. Where did the money come from? She would nag Henry until he gave in. If he refused, she'd burst into tears, threatening a miscarriage or claiming to be on the verge of a breakdown. Henry, still infatuated and desperate to maintain his image, would secretly borrow from loan sharks to fund her spending habits. The breaking point came one evening when a loan shark named Bruno showed up, banging on the door and demanding payment for the restaurant loan. Henry wasn't home. A humiliated Margaret had to beg for an extension. When she came back inside and saw Vivian live streaming on Instagram, showing off a new $1,000 skincare set, she finally snapped. She lunged forward, snatched Vivian's phone, and smashed it on the floor. "What kind of woman are you?" she screamed. "Your husband is drowning in debt, and I just had to humiliate myself begging for more time. And you're sitting here shopping? Are you trying to bankrupt this family?" Vivian stared at her shattered phone, and then her own fury erupted. She stood up and shoved Margaret so hard she stumbled and hit the edge of a table. "You crazy old woman! You dare break my phone? The money I spend is my husband's money. What does it have to do with you? This family is in debt because your son is an incompetent failure, not because of me. I already sacrificed enough by marrying him without a proper wedding or any status, and now you want to lecture me?" Margaret clutched her aching back, staring in horror at the daughter-in-law she once praised. You hit me? You disrespectful monster? I'm kicking you out of this house. Kick me out?" Vivian let out a cold, challenging laugh. "You try it. If I go, I'm taking your precious grandson with me. Let's see if your family line ends with you. And don't forget, that failing restaurant is legally in my name. I could sell it for scrap and see who suffers then." Just then, Henry stumbled in, reeking of alcohol. Seeing his mother on the floor and his wife in a rage, he rushed to intervene. "Stop it, both of you! Are you trying to kill me?" he yelled in desperation. Margaret grabbed her son's leg, weeping. "Henry, look, she hit me. This is the creature you left Victoria for. Can you see it now? Are you finally seeing the truth?" Henry looked at his mother, then at Vivian, then around the once peaceful home that now resembled a war zone. He dropped his hands in defeat. He didn't dare scold Vivian, who held his future in her hands, but it pained him to see his mother being treated this way. "Vivian, please, that's enough." "She's an old woman," he mumbled. "You shut up," Vivian shot back. "You're a weak, pathetic man. Your mother attacks me, breaks my property, and you defend her? Fine. You all gang up on me. I'm leaving. I don't need this wreck of a house anymore." She stormed off to her room, slamming the door. Margaret sat on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Henry leaned his head against the wall, tearing at his hair. The scene was so pathetic that even hearing it secondhand made me shudder. Karma had come swiftly, and it had struck precisely where Margaret was most vulnerable, her pride and her hope for an heir. She had chased away a devoted daughter-in-law only to bring home a tyrant who now ruled over her. A week after that explosive fight, Henry's finances completely collapsed. The restaurant was forced to close. Bruno, the loan shark, gave him a final ultimatum. If he didn't produce $20,000 in 3 days, they would come and seize Margaret's house. Henry scrambled, trying to borrow from friends and former colleagues, but everyone turned him away. The story of how he'd left his wife for a mistress and failed in business had spread. No one wanted to get involved. In his desperation, Henry remembered a secret savings account he'd kept from his time with me, money he had skimmed from my salary without telling his mother. It was about $30,000. He kept it in a small safe in his bedroom, a rainy day fund. That night it was pouring rain, just like the night I was kicked out. Henry came home drunk, his mind on fire with the impending deadline. He stumbled into the bedroom, planning to take the money to settle with the loan sharks and save his mother's house. But when he opened the door, a shocking sight met his eyes. The closet was wide open and empty. All of Vivian's designer clothes and bags were gone. And more terrifyingly, the small safe in the corner was open and completely empty. Not a single bill was left. Henry rubbed his eyes, thinking he was hallucinating. He lunged at the safe, searching frantically. It was all gone. His entire safety net had vanished. On the vanity table was a piece of paper with a message hastily scrawled in bright red lipstick. "Henry, I'm sorry. I can't live a life of poverty with you. Consider this money compensation for my youth. Don't look for me. I'm going abroad. Goodbye forever." The rage that shot through Henry's veins sobered him up instantly. Vivian had run away. She hadn't just left him, she had stolen his last lifeline, pushing him and his mother off a cliff. "You bitch. Get back here," Henry roared like a wounded animal. Without a second thought, he grabbed his motorcycle keys and bolted out of the house. "Henry, where are you going? It's pouring," Margaret yelled, running out after hearing the commotion, but she only caught a glimpse of her son's back disappearing into the sheet of rain. Henry tore through the empty streets, his mind consumed by a single thought. He had to catch Vivian and get his money back. He guessed she was heading for the airport or a bus station. The rain lashed at his face, the alcohol muddled his senses, and the hatred blinded him. He weaved through traffic, running red lights, muttering curses under his breath. He reached a major intersection. The light turned red, but Henry didn't see it, or didn't care. He gunned the engine, intending to fly through and chase the ghost of his betrayer. At that exact moment, a large cargo truck, driven by a man named Tom, sped through the intersection from the cross street. The truck's horn blared, a long, piercing shriek, followed by the horrifying screech of tires on the slick pavement. Crash! The sound of the collision was deafening, drowning out the thunder. Henry's motorcycle was thrown dozens of feet, shattering into pieces. His body was flung into the air like a rag doll, then slammed onto the cold asphalt, tumbling several times before coming to a stop. A pool of crimson blood spread out, mixing with the rainwater. His helmet, cracked in two, lay nearby. The terrified truck driver scrambled out of his cab, his face as white as a sheet. Onlookers stopped, their whispers and calls for an ambulance filling the chaotic air. Henry lay there, his eyes wide open, staring up at the dark, unforgiving sky as the rain fell like 1,000 tiny needles. In his final moments of consciousness, images flashed through his mind. He saw me, his faithful wife, smiling happily with our daughter. He saw his elderly mother, crying out for him at the door. And he saw Vivian, laughing mockingly, sitting on a pile of his money. Then, everything faded into darkness and excruciating pain. An hour later, at Mount Sinai Hospital, Margaret collapsed when she received the call from the police. Sobbing hysterically, she rushed to the hospital. But when she arrived, the news she received from the doctor was even more devastating. The ER at Mount Sinai that night was thick with the smell of antiseptic and blood. The hallway was a cacophony of rattling gurneys, nurses calling out names, and the weeping of families. A chaotic symphony played on the edge of life and death. Margaret sat slumped in a corner, her body trembling, her wrinkled houseclothes still damp from the rain. She stared at the closed doors of the operating room, where her only son was fighting for his life. The red light above the door glowed ominously, the color of the blood on the street. "Family of Henry Miller?" a nurse called out, holding a clipboard. Margaret scrambled to her feet, her legs so weak she almost fell. "Here, I'm his mother. How is my son?" "The patient has lost a lot of blood and has complex traumatic brain injuries," the nurse said briskly. "We're doing everything we can, but his condition is critical. The family needs to pay a $20,000 deposit immediately so we can secure more blood and specialized surgical equipment. Any delay could be fatal." $20,000. That number again. It felt like a boulder crushing her chest. "Please, can I have a little time?" "I'm calling someone to bring the money," Margaret pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "Hurry up. Your son's life is being measured in minutes," the nurse said coolly before turning back into the OR, leaving Margaret alone with her despair. Shaking, Margaret pulled out her phone. Her first instinct wasn't to call me. In her mind, the first person to call was Vivian, the new daughter-in-law carrying the family bloodline. She dialed Vivian's number. The phone rang and rang, unanswered. "The subscriber you have dialed is not available." She tried again and again, the same robotic voice. She tried texting, messaging on Facebook and Instagram, only to be met with a stark reality. Vivian's accounts were gone, or she had been blocked. "You monster. Where did you go with my son's money? You've killed him, Vivian," Margaret wailed, attracting pitying glances from others in the waiting room. It was only then that she fully registered what Henry had yelled before he left. "She ran away. She took all the money." Margaret's mind reeled. She remembered all the times Vivian had professed her love for Henry, her affection for her mother-in-law, her promises of a son. It was all a performance. She had been planning this all along, bleeding them dry, convincing Henry to sell his car, to take out loans. And when he had nothing left, she took the last of his cash and disappeared. "Oh God, I raised a snake in my own house," Margaret sobbed, beating her chest. "My son, you were so foolish, Henry." But the tragedy wasn't over. Her phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Hello?" she answered weakly. "Is this Margaret? Your son, Henry. He's good at hiding, huh?" A man's gravelly voice threatened. I heard he's in an accident, about to die. It was Bruno, the loan shark. Please, leave us alone. My son is in surgery. Surgery or whatever, I don't care, the man yelled. My money is real. If he dies, you pay. I'm letting you know, my guys are standing outside your house right now. The deed might be with the bank, but everything inside isn't. If I don't see my $20,000, plus interest, by morning, my men are going in to clean the place out, and then we'll pay your son a visit at the hospital. You've been warned. Click. Margaret's arm went limp, the phone clattering to the floor, the screen cracking. This was it. Rock bottom. The house was about to be lost, her son was dying, and she was penniless. Her precious daughter-in-law was a fugitive, and loan sharks were at her door. She scrolled through her contacts. Relatives didn't pick up, or they made excuses, fearing she was calling to borrow money. Her fair-weather friends were nowhere to be found now that she was in trouble. In her desperate, muddled state, one name surfaced in her mind like a last-ditch life raft. Vicky, my name. The daughter-in-law she had scorned and cast out. But she remembered that I had a soft heart. And more importantly, she'd heard I was a director now, very successful, with more money than I knew what to do with. She's so rich, $20,000 is nothing to her, Margaret told herself with her typical selfish logic. Besides, Henry is the father of her child. She can't just watch him die. She picked up her broken phone and dialed my number, forcing her voice into a familiar tone of maternal authority mixed with a dash of pathetic desperation to try and force my hand. And my response was a single, devastating question. Who do you think you are? I had rejected her, coldly and definitively. When I hung up, Margaret sat frozen in the hospital corridor. Her last hope was gone. She stared at the operating room, tears tracing paths through the grime on her wrinkled face. For the first time in her life, she felt a terrifying, absolute loneliness. She realized that she and her son had single-handedly destroyed every bridge, every lifeline they ever had. Vicky, I was wrong, I was so wrong, she whispered, but her belated apology was heard only by the sterile hospital walls. But what Margaret didn't know was that on the other end of the line, after hanging up, I did not sit still. I sat in my living room, staring at the dark screen of my phone. The chamomile tea was ice cold, but a fire was burning in my gut. It wasn't worry for Henry, it was an unsettling mix of emotions. I had told Margaret I didn't care. I had scoffed at her audacity. But deep down there was a morbid curiosity, a need to see the final act of the tragedy they had written and starred in themselves. I wanted to go there, not to play the role of a benevolent savior as Margaret hoped, but to witness firsthand the price of betrayal. I wanted to see the pathetic state of the people who had so arrogantly thrown me out, and above all, I wanted to show them, unequivocally, where Victoria Miller stood today. I went to my bedroom to change. I didn't choose my usual comfortable clothes. I selected a chic black sheath dress that hugged my frame, paired with an elegant cream-colored blazer. I slipped on a pair of designer heels and grabbed the luxury handbag I'd recently bought myself to celebrate a successful project. I applied light, sharp makeup and a coat of powerful red lipstick. The woman in the mirror was successful, confident, and proud. This was not the frumpy, tired Vicky who smelled of cooking oil. "Mommy's going out for a little bit." "You be a good girl," I said, kissing Lily's forehead before heading out the door, getting into my own car, and driving into the night. At Mount Sinai, the sound of my heels clicked authoritatively on the linoleum floor, a sharp counterpoint to the chaotic hum of the hospital. The smell of antiseptic hit me, making me wrinkle my nose. It reminded me of the rundown county hospital where I had given birth to Lily, alone, with only my mother by my side. The memory solidified my resolve. I saw Margaret from a distance. She was curled up on a waiting room chair, her head buried in her knees, looking so small and wretched I almost mistook her for a homeless woman. I stopped in front of her, my shadow falling over her. Sensing my presence, she slowly looked up. Her eyes were swollen, red, and vacant. When she saw me, this elegant, beautiful woman looking down at her, it took her a few seconds to register who I was. "Vicky! Vicky! You came!" Margaret scrambled to her feet like a drowning person grasping at a log, rushing forward to grab my hand. You brought the money, didn't you? Oh, thank God. Hurry, the doctors are waiting. I took a deliberate step back, smoothly avoiding her touch as if it were contaminated. Calm down, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. I'm not here to pay for anything. Margaret froze, her hands still reaching out in midair. The desperate, teary smile on her face vanished, replaced by disbelief and a flicker of her old anger. You, what did you say? If you didn't bring money, why are you here? To laugh at me? Yes, I replied, looking her straight in the eye. It was a cruel but honest answer. I came to see what karma looks like. I came to see where the mother-in-law who threw my clothes out into the rain is sitting now. And I came to see where the man who beat his wife for a mistress is lying. You evil, heartless monster, Margaret shrieked, pointing at me. He's in there. He's dying. You were his wife. How can you say such things? Wife? I let out a sharp laugh. Have you forgotten? You and your son stripped me of that title 3 months ago. I'm just a stranger now, and a stranger has no obligation to save the life of someone who tried to kill her spirit. I stepped closer, leaning in so only she could hear my whisper. Margaret, the $20,000 you need. It's not a lot of money for me now. I could write a check without a second thought. But I won't. Do you know why? Margaret stared at me, a new kind of fear creeping into her eyes. Because I would rather donate that money to an orphanage. I would rather use it to save stray dogs and cats from a shelter. At least animals know how to wag their tails in gratitude. You and your son only know how to bite the hand that feeds you. Get out. Get out of here. Margaret was so choked with rage that she collapsed back onto the chair, clutching her chest and gasping for air. Just then, the doors to the OR swung open. A surgeon, Dr. Williams, walked out, pulling off his mask, his expression grave. Family of Henry Miller? Margaret was too weak to stand. I glanced at her, then turned to the doctor. She's right here. How is he, doctor? The doctor, assuming I was family, shook his head grimly. We've stopped the bleeding for now, but the brain trauma is too severe. Barring a miracle, he will likely remain in a persistent vegetative state for the rest of his life. Furthermore, the cost of long-term intensive care will be astronomical, thousands of dollars a day. The family needs to prepare, both emotionally and financially. A vegetative state, the words landed like a life sentence. Not dead, but not alive either. Just a body without a soul, an unbearable burden for those left behind. Upon hearing this, Margaret's eyes rolled back in her head, and she fainted, slumping over in the chair. A couple of nurses rushed over to help. I stood there, watching the chaos. I looked at the woman who once breathed fire, now limp and unconscious. I looked towards the ICU where Henry now lay, tangled in a web of tubes and wires. I didn't feel the satisfaction I thought I would. I just felt an empty sort of pity for a life wasted on greed and foolishness. They had spent their lives scheming, fighting over every penny and every scrap of control, only to end up with nothing but a dark, bleak future. I was about to turn and leave. My purpose here was served. I had seen their end. But as I took a few steps, a cold, trembling hand suddenly grabbed my ankle. I flinched and looked down. Margaret had regained consciousness. She was no longer on the chair. She had crawled on the floor, dragging herself to my feet. She clutched my leg, her tear-streaked face looking up at me, stripped of all pride and arrogance. "Vicky, I'm begging you. Please, save him." She began banging her head on the cold hospital floor. Thud, thud, thud. I know I was wrong. I was a foolish, cruel old woman. I deserved to die. But Henry is still young. Please, you're successful now. Have pity. Save him. Give him a chance to be human again. I swear, I'll become a beggar. I'll work as a maid for you for the rest of my life to pay you back and atone for my sins. The sight of a 60-year-old woman prostrating herself at the feet of a young, well-dressed woman in the middle of a busy hospital caused everyone who passed by to stare. They whispered and pointed. Some probably thought I was a terrible, ungrateful daughter. Others might have guessed the real story. I looked down at Margaret. This was the woman who had made me kneel to scrub floors, who had counted every piece of meat on my plate. Now she was kneeling before me. A flicker of human compassion stirred in me. But the voice of a woman who had suffered too much reminded me, "Don't trust them. Their promises are only valid when they have no other choice. Get up." "Stop making a scene," I said, my voice still cold, but perhaps a fraction less harsh. "You promise to pay me back?" "With what?" "Your house is about to be taken. Your son is a vegetable. What will you pay me with?" I. Margaret choked on her sobs, unable to answer. She slumped forward, her forehead pressed against my expensive heels, her hands clasped together as if in prayer. "Vicky, I know you hate me, you hate Henry. I know I was wrong. But please, let bygones be bygones. We were family once. We ate at the same table for 5 years. Don't you remember? When you first married him, I took you to the market. I taught you how to make that beef stew you like. Can you really forget all of that?" I stood frozen. "Taught me to make stew?" Was she really trying to evoke what she considered fond memories? I let out a dry, hollow laugh. "Your memory is excellent, Margaret. You remember the stew, but do you remember who had to wake up at 5 a.m. to prep the vegetables and simmer the broth? You remember taking me to the market, but do you remember standing there, pointing your finger and calling me wasteful and stupid because I bought organic carrots that cost 50 cents more?" I bent down, looking her straight in the eye, my voice turning to steel. "You talk about 5 years at the same table? For 5 of those years, I ate my meals with tears. Do you remember the dinners where you would pile all the best cuts of meat onto your son's plate while I got the scraps and bones? You told me it would help me stay slim. Have you forgotten that?" Margaret flinched, looking away to avoid my gaze, but she made one last desperate attempt. That's how the older generation teaches. I was strict because I wanted you to become a responsible woman, to take care of the family. I didn't mean any harm. Henry was wrong to hit you, but he's a man, he has a temper. Now he's lying in there, between life and death. Please, Vicky, you're so well off now. $20,000 is nothing to you. Just save him. We can start over. I'll welcome you back home. I'll kick Vivian out. I'll let you be the mistress of the house. Even now, she was still deluded about her own power. Did she really think the position of Mrs. Miller was some great prize I was still desperate for? Be quiet, I snapped, unable to contain my disgust. Don't you dare speak to me with that patronizing tone. You think I want your debt-ridden house? You think I want that cheating, vegetative man you call a son? I pulled a tissue from my handbag, wiped my lips, and continued in the coldest voice I could muster. You say you were strict to help me grow. No, Margaret, you weren't strict. You were cruel. You exploited my labor, you stole my salary, you disrespected my parents. And the culmination of it all was that rainy night when you and your son kicked me out like a stray dog because I refused to sell my parents' property to fund his affair. That wasn't discipline. That was your vile nature, ingrained in your very bones. Margaret trembled violently, each word of mine peeling back another layer of her thick-skinned hypocrisy. And you want me to save him? I gestured towards the ICU. Why should I save the man who helped push me to the brink? When I was walking in the rain with my daughter, homeless and penniless, did you feel any pity for me? When your son slapped me until I bled, did you stop him? Or did you stand there and egg him on? Margaret sobbed, utterly broken. The universe has a way of balancing the scales, Margaret. What your son is enduring, what you are experiencing now, is the price for your cruelty. Don't blame fate, don't blame others. Blame yourselves. I stood up straight, adjusting my blazer. This conversation had drained me, but it had also cleansed me of years of suppressed pain. But Margaret, in her absolute desperation, clung to her last straw. Okay, I was wrong, Henry was wrong. But the baby? What about the baby in Vivian's womb? He's still our blood. Can you let his father die? Let him be an orphan before he's even born? You're a mother, Vicky. Have mercy on an innocent child. She was using the baby. She thought she could appeal to my maternal instincts, to my basic decency as a mother. But she had no idea that the truth about that very child would be the final, fatal blow to all her hopes. I looked at her, my anger morphing into a deep, profound pity for her bottomless ignorance. You really want to know the truth about your precious grandson, don't you? Fine. Let me show you, so you can finally wake up and see what your son sacrificed his life for. I opened my handbag, took out my phone, and pulled up a file my private investigator, Joe, had sent me 2 days prior. I turned the bright screen towards Margaret's bewildered face. On it was a series of crystal-clear photos and screenshots of text messages. Look closely. This is your darling daughter-in-law, Vivian. And this man is Richard, a married real estate mogul from the Hamptons. The first photo showed Vivian and a paunchy older man in a very intimate embrace at a luxury resort. The date stamp was from 6 months ago. 6 months ago, she was with this man. Back then, your son Henry was still busy playing the role of a devoted husband at home with me. I swiped to the next image. Vivian's sonogram from a private clinic. Look at the estimated due date, Margaret. This fetus is over 22 weeks old. That's more than 5 months. Your son only started seeing her about 3 months ago. Do you understand what that means? Margaret stared at the screen, her lips trembling. No, it can't be. She told me she was only 3 months along. Her belly was so small. She lied to you, I scoffed. She's a professional. She knows how to dress to hide a pregnancy. And this text exchange is the best part. I opened a conversation between Vivian and her friend, Stacy. The black and white text was a shameless confession. Vivian, Stacy, I'm pregnant with Richard's baby. He's terrified of his wife, so he won't claim it. He gave me $5,000 and told me to get an abortion. Stacy, so what are you going to do? You can't raise it on your own. Vivian, I've got a new mark. His name is Henry. Only son, family has a nice brownstone, and his old mom is desperate for a grandson. He's weak-willed and easy to fool. I'll just cry a little, and he'll believe anything. I'll make him the father. It's a perfect setup. I get financial support and a place to live. His mother is so old, the second she hears grandson, she'll probably kick his wife out and welcome me with open arms. Reading those words, Margaret looked as if she had been struck by lightning. She collapsed to the floor, clutching her head, her mouth open in a silent scream. Her entire worldview, her pride, the hope for an heir that she had used to justify all her cruelty, it all shattered into nothing. Her son had been played for the biggest fool. He had betrayed his loyal wife, sacrificed his family and his dignity, all for a manipulative woman, only to be a pawn in her scheme to legitimize another man's child. He had spent my money, his money, and was willing to sell my property to support a woman carrying another man's bloodline. And the ultimate irony, it was while chasing that con artist to get his money back that he had his accident. He was lying in that room barely alive because of a lie. His life was ruined for nothing. Oh God! My son, how could you be so stupid? It's my fault. I ruined you. Margaret let out a terrible, guttural scream, banging her head on the tiled floor. Her cries were no longer for show. It was the raw agony of a mother realizing she had personally pushed her child to his doom. She had helped a predator destroy her son's family, trading a good woman for a plague. Do you see now? I put my phone away, looking down at her with pity. That is the reality you have to face. There is no precious grandson. There is no devoted daughter-in-law. There is only the foolishness and greed of you and your son. Vicky, save him. Even if he was a fool, he's my son. Margaret begged again, crawling towards me, but her strength was gone, her voice a mere whisper. I glanced one last time toward the ICU. Henry was despicable, yes, but seeing him lying there, conned into oblivion, I felt a flicker of sadness for the waste of a human life. However, sadness did not mean I was going to shoulder his burden. Margaret, I cannot give you the money. That money is for my daughter's future, the granddaughter you cast aside. But out of basic human decency, I won't let you starve. I took a business card from my wallet and pressed it into her hand. This is the number for Grace, the director of a charitable foundation my company supports. They assist with difficult accident cases. I will call her and ask them to review Henry's case. If you're lucky, they might cover a portion of the hospital bills. The rest, you will have to figure out on your own. Sell the house, borrow money, that's your problem now. This is all the help you'll get from me. With that, I turned and walked away. I could hear Margaret calling after me. "Vicky, I'm sorry. I regret everything." But I did not stop. As I walked out of the hospital, the cold night air felt strangely warm. I had done right by my own conscience. I didn't get revenge by condemning them to death, but I wasn't foolish enough to be used by them again. I had shown them the truth, and the truth was the most brutal verdict of all. Life is fair. Henry would face a future of darkness or a lifetime of disability, the price of his betrayal. Vivian, on the run with stolen money, would surely never find peace. And Margaret would spend the rest of her days in a hell of regret and loneliness. As for me, I looked up at the star-filled sky. Tomorrow, I would take my daughter to school. I would go to my office, filled with a passion for my work. I would live a brilliant, independent, and happy life. Because I deserved it. The darkness of the night seemed to solidify behind me as I walked out of Mount Sinai's gates. Ambulance sirens still wailed in the distance, but my mind was remarkably calm. I had turned my back on Margaret, leaving her with the raw truth and her bottomless pain. My steps faltered for a moment, not out of regret, but because my conscience, the fundamental core of who I am, wouldn't let me be as cruel as they were. I couldn't just walk away completely. I stopped by my car and pulled out my phone. I didn't call Margaret. I called Grace, the director of the Bridging Hearts Charitable Foundation, a close partner of my company. "Grace, it's Vicky. I'm so sorry to call this late." "Yes, I have an urgent case at Mount Sinai. A young man, terrible traffic accident, family has no resources. His elderly mother was just conned out of everything they had." "Yes, could you review his file for emergency aid? I'll vouch for the legitimacy of the situation. Whatever the Foundation's policies allow is fine. And no, please don't mention my name. Just say the Foundation learned of the case through the hospital." Hanging up, I felt a sense of release. It was the last, most decent thing I could do for Henry. I wasn't using my own money, but I was using my reputation to open a door for him. I did it not for him, but for my own peace of mind and for my daughter. I wanted to be able to look back and know that I had acted with integrity. 2 years passed. It was a cold, late December evening in New York, the city glittering with holiday lights. I stood in my office on the 20th floor, looking down at the sparkling metropolis. On my desk was a polished brass nameplate, Victoria Miller, Vice President. In those 2 years, I had worked tirelessly. From a divorced woman kicked out of her home, I had risen to become a key executive in my corporation. I bought a beautiful high-rise condo overlooking the river and moved my parents in with me. Lily was now in first grade at a private school, as bright and beautiful as ever. My life was filled with laughter and peace. On New Year's Eve, I was driving home after some last-minute shopping. Stopped at a red light at a busy intersection, my eyes fell on a scene on the sidewalk that made me freeze. An old woman with stark white hair, dressed in ragged clothes, sat on the cold concrete. She was trying to spoon-feed watery porridge to a man in a rickety wheelchair beside her. The man was skeletal, his limbs twisted, his mouth hanging open in a permanent grimace. A thin line of drool trickled down his chin onto a dirty bib. Though time and hardship had ravaged their features, I recognized them instantly. It was Margaret and Henry. The surgery 2 years ago had saved Henry's life, but the brain damage had left him in a vegetative state, a living shell, dependent on his mother for everything. Margaret, after selling her beloved brownstone to pay the loan sharks and the initial medical bills, was left with nothing. The once proud matriarch was now a full-time caretaker for her disabled son, living in poverty. "Eat, son, just one more bite, please," Margaret pleaded, her voice raspy. Her hand trembled as she lifted the spoon, but Henry had a small seizure, knocking the bowl from her hand. Hot porridge splattered over both of them. Margaret burst into sobs, wiping at her son's shirt with her bare hands while pounding her own chest. "Why is my life so miserable? I should have just died back then. Vivian, you destroyed us." Henry made a series of garbled, meaningless sounds, tears leaking from the corners of his vacant eyes. Perhaps somewhere in the wreckage of his mind, he could still feel the pain, the regret. He was a prisoner in his own body, forced to watch his elderly mother suffer for him every single day. It was a punishment more terrible than death. As for Vivian, I'd heard through my PI, Joe, that the real estate mogul, Richard, had found her. His wife had discovered the affair, and in a rage, he had beaten Vivian and taken back every last cent. She was last seen working a menial job somewhere on the West Coast, her beauty faded, her schemes all for naught. You reap what you sow. Margaret looked up, her gaze falling on my luxury car. She couldn't see me through the tinted windows, but she saw the wealth she once had and so desperately craved. Her eyes filled with a look of longing, regret, and utter despair. She had no idea that the person sitting inside was the useless daughter-in-law she had thrown away. The light turned green. I rolled up my window, pressed the accelerator, and the car glided forward, leaving the image of the wretched mother and son behind. I didn't stop to give them money. I didn't get out to gloat. My silence, my complete disappearance from their lives, was the final word. We belonged to two different worlds now. I drove home, where my parents and my daughter were waiting. Lily ran to the door and leaped into my arms. "Mommy, you're home. Grandma and Grandpa are making cookies." I hugged her tight, breathing in the sweet scent of her hair, feeling the warmth of my family surround me. Mommy's home, my love. Looking at the happy, festive scene in my warm, bright apartment at my healthy parents, my thriving daughter, I smiled. This was real happiness. A happiness built on love, hard work, and kindness, not on schemes and deceit. The past was finally, truly, behind me.